society. It was wrong. The party should have opposed it. It was wrong that we were going into an election pledged to maintain a public sector wage freeze and continue some elements of cuts in public expenditure. We were inheriting and accepting the destruction of so much in our society that had already been done. So we challenged. And many thought it wouldn't be possible. And that mass movement that arose last summer ended up with an amazing result in the leadership election last year, when 280,000 people voted and a 60% majority was achieved. I'm not pretending that the last 10 months has been the easiest of times for anybody, but I say this: if you are to represent people, if you are to have a mass movement, then we have to owe our allegiance to the people and the mass movement and the support of many people who wanted to see politics done very differently. And I'm very grateful to all those that have stood up to be counted over the past few weeks, when much of our media has been united in the view that basically we should shut up and go away because they don't like our voices, and instead we're offering something very, very different. I tell you this: John McDonnell was appointed Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer straight after the election last year, and I'm very proud of the work that John has done as Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. He and his team, it's not about individuals, it's about teams of people, immediately got to work on a different economic strategy. A strategy that invests, a strategy that provides work for all, and a strategy that analyses what government does as it benefits or damages different communities. That surely has to be the right way of doing things. So he looked at the environmental impact of what the government is doing. He looked at the effect on women of what the government is doing. He looked at the effect on black and minority ethnic communities on what the government is doing. And he looks at an economic strategy that is fundamentally wrong and has to be changed. Has to be changed in the direction of investment in public services, investment in education, investment in growing good technology industries, but it's also about investment in future generations. But access to education, access to health, access to work, access to so many community benefits is not the same. If you live in a wealthy area, you will not have had too many cuts in your local government budget. If you live in a poor area, you will have had massive cuts in your local authority budget. You could draw a map of England, put over it a colour, shall we say red, for the poorest areas of the country. You could put large red swathes all over places in England. Many parts of London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, Bristol, Newcastle, put them there. Then overlay it another map, and you could say colour this one blue, for example. That would be a very good choice. And you could put there the areas that have received the biggest cuts in public expenditure, the biggest attack on their local authority budget. And you know what? The red would be obliterated by the blue. Wouldn't it be nice if we turned it the other way around and the red obliterated the blue? But there are also huge issues about discrimination and racism within our society. I talked about the campaign on the sus laws all those years ago, but you have to think of where our rights, where our justice, where our achievements come from. Was the slave trade abolished because the House of Commons voted to abolish the slave trade, or was it because of the heroic actions taken by people who were no longer prepared to live under slavery that forced the owners and the whole system to stand up against it? And so ours is also an issue of culture and cultural expression, because we don't live just by economic means alone. We live by our dreams, by our hopes, we live by our artistic endeavour. So I am not ashamed to quote great poets like Maya Angelou or Langston Hughes or so many others. And one of the greatest events to me that I've had the privilege to take part in over the past year has been a discussion about the effects of African literature on Europe and Europe's effects on Africa with the great Ben Okri. To me, those kind of discussions are very, very important. But you then have to look at the reality of life in Britain today. The amount of money spent by major companies on wages as a proportion of their income is reducing. The amount of gross national product goes on wages is reducing. The amount spent on very high executive pay is increasing. The amount spent on dividends is going up, generally speaking. And we have an economy that is imbalanced regionally and imbalanced in so many other ways. And then you start to look at why that is. You look at the way trade union membership has been attacked ever since Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister in 1979. Then you look at the attacks on the rights at work, workplace rights that are so important, rights to representation that are so important, and a whole big pattern begins to emerge. And then you look at the problems over housing, of health and of education. Why is it that so many black youngsters are stopped on our streets? Why is it that so many black youngsters are underachieving in school when they should not be? They should be getting the same chances and advantages as everybody else. And then you look into other areas on housing, health and so many other issues. So ours is an agenda about equality, ours is an agenda about justice, and ours is an agenda that simply says this to other people that feel uncomfortable with discussing these issues. I simply say this: it is such a crying waste for all of us if somebody lives in a bad place, cannot achieve in school, cannot get to college, cannot get to university, cannot become an architect, a doctor, a nurse, an engineer, or any of those other great professions. We are all the losers because we've lost a great doctor, engineer, nurse, or whatever else. So it is about investment in people, their lives, and all of our communities. And as Roger was pointing out, the growth of racism in our society has dramatically increased since the vote on the European Union. In this very park, straight a week or so after that vote, when the police had told me that hate crime reporting had gone up at least 5-fold in a week, I think there's cause for serious concern within our society. That is reported hate crime. So we have to stand up to ensure that all communities are protected. We also have to quite bluntly say to those that indulge in an orgy of xenophobia, of racist remarks and attacks against minorities, you think you've got a problem over of school places, you think you've got a problem over local work, you think you've got a problem over housing. You may well have. You may well have a problem. You can expend a vast amount of energy abusing your next door neighbour because they're of a different nationality, because their family comes from a different part of the world. And you can create the most horrible atmosphere of hate, prejudice, nastiness and injustice within your community. And you know what? At the end of that, you've built not one house, trained one teacher, employed one nurse, built one school or anything else. It is so utterly destructive of everything that we stand here together to try to achieve. And so I want to make it absolutely clear that we will not tolerate any form of anti-Semitism, any form of Islamophobia, any form of racism whatsoever within our society. And if there are concerns about what goes on with any of our organisations, local authorities, our political parties or anything else, we have to be prepared to examine it, to expose it, to face up to it, and to deal with it. I was a great friend of the late Bernie Grant, former leader of Haringey Council and MP. And Sharon, his widow, is here today, and I'm very proud that she's come. Bernie and I were on Haringey Council. We looked at the issues of structural discrimination there and developed policies which gave chances, gave opportunities to everyone else and dealt with those issues. We have to be prepared to do it, not all over again, but keep on doing it all the time. And so there was a time when it was blacks and Irish people that were disgustingly treated. Remember the signs that were up there in the 1960s? It doesn't help if we then start that against some other community. Say the attack on the Muslim community that routinely goes on. You have to bring people and communities together. That has got to be the only way forward. And so what we put forward in this election campaign are two things. One is an economic strategy which is about investing, which is about a growing economy, that is about improving workers' rights and opportunities, that is about investing in young people, not saddling them with 50k and more of debts because they had the temerity to go to university. End the market in education, start the right to education. And it's about dealing with the housing crisis that affects every part of this country, nowhere more so than anyone on average or below average incomes in London. We have to invest in housing, and there's a virtuous circle in doing it. Invest in a lifetime tenancy on a council flat. You've given a family somewhere safe, decent and secure to live. You've given a child the opportunity of growing up, not with the threat of moving every 6 months, leaving their mates and losing school. And you've created jobs in the building industry, jobs in the supply chain. It becomes an economic generator to invest in bricks and mortar rather than a benefit system that subsidises at one level high rents and at the other level low wages. So you deal with these issues by a higher a real living wage of £10 per hour, which is what the TUC figure has been put up. So it is the economic issues, it is the services that we want to deliver. But it's also about the kind of politics and kind of society we want to live in. People in this park have made huge sacrifices over many years to ensure that supplementary schools happen so that children whose first language is not English or the family's first language is not English grow up understanding, yes, the need to learn English, but also the need to retain the understanding and culture and language of where their families come from. It is not a weakness in a society to have bilingual children. It's an incredible plus and strength, and we should be proud of it. But it's also how we do our politics. How we do our politics, is it to be that the views of ordinary people, and we're all ordinary, we're all very normal. In fact, we're so normal, each one of us is totally unique. Unique in our outlook, our ideas and our views, but it's also about how we want to develop politically as a society. Are we to allow a number of very experienced commentators to decide what competence is, what views are, what ideas are, or what pressure is? Or are we to instead say, actually, what's happened over the past year has been totally fascinating.